Alright, so first I would like to ask a question to everyone in this room. You can answer it to yourself. How many of you know someone that has to take a life-saving medication like insulin? The reason this topic is so dear to me is because my own mother has been battling with diabetes since the day I was born. Medication has been drastically increasing over the past decade, which leads me to my main proposition. The affordability of prescription drugs has a negative impact on the American society. First, pricing of life-saving medications continue to rise without any reduction. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, most people taking RX, which are prescription drugs, say they can afford the treatment, but 1/4 of them have a difficult time affording their medicine. 60 companies raised prices on almost 300 drugs in the first 2 days of this year alone. Price tracking firm RX Saving Solutions told NBC News the average hike is 6.3%, nearly 3 times the rate of inflation. This is terrifying due to the fact that nearly half of Americans use prescription drugs according to the Journal of the American Medical Association. Another blatant example of price fixing is by a guy named Martin Shkreli. Shkreli jacked up the price of a drug called Daraprim by over 5,000%, and this was used to treat immune system diseases. The craziest part of it all is that his decision to inflate prices is 100% legal. Major drug companies raise prices such a small percentage that it is hard to notice these slight changes. The best example of how drug pricing has become is insulin, a drug that millions of people with diabetes need in order to survive. The Truven Health Analytics stated that in 1996, one common type of insulin cost just $21. And now in 2019, that exact same insulin costs $295. Insulin is one of the most expensive liquids in America, and let alone 7 million diabetics need insulin injections just to survive. The Washington Post states that 23 million are confirmed diabetics, and if you add the people who are pre-diabetic, the number increases to over 100 million. Untreated diabetes can lead to nerve damage, kidney failure, and even death. Diabetics are now taking drastic measures to get their hands on the drug, as far as going to the black market. That is not even the worst of it all. Desperate patients have also started taking lower doses to make their supply last longer, which is incredibly dangerous. One instance, a diabetic man by the name of Alex Smith lost his life because he was rationing insulin since he couldn't afford the medication. Which leads me to my next supporting claim. The patents and price control of prescription drugs are insufficient. The cost of insulin in the United States is significantly more expensive compared to other countries like Germany, Taiwan, Canada, that all produce from the same manufacturers. By the way, the high cost of insulin is hitting people with insurance, and the people that don't have insurance are the ones that suffer the most. So my question to you is, why has insulin become so expensive in just the United States? A major reason is due to the drug patents owned by the 3 major companies, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi Aventis. These 3 companies account for more than 90% of the global insulin market. Companies with drug patents generally say they need to keep drug prices high so they can recover the cost to make a new drug in the future. This was not the case with insulin, since it was discovered by pharmaceutical companies. It was developed back in 1921 by a group of Canadian researchers, including Frederick Banting and Charles Best. Their intention wasn't to cash out, but they gave the discovery away to help as many people as possible. Unfortunately, they licensed the manufacturing of insulin to Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, in which they could patent any improvements. Unlike in other countries, US law says patents can't be extended as you make changes to the drugs. Keywords: changes, not improvements. Drug companies don't have to prove that a new drug is better, but they just have to prove that it's not worse. The Washington Post states that almost 80% of new patents were for existing drugs, and the minimal changes to these drugs are just to extend these same patents. This is exactly what insulin manufacturers do, is they slightly tweak the drug, refile the patents, and then lock out any competition. The American government does not cap drug prices, so the 3 companies noted earlier have complete control over the price of insulin. Another question I want to address is, how is this not considered price fixing, which is illegal? Next, this leads me to my third claim Trump's plan to address drug prices is inadequate. Trump recently signed 2 pieces of legislation into law that aims to inform consumers about drug prices. Both measures, the Know the Lowest Price Act and the Patient Right to Know Drug Prices Act, aim to end the drug industry's so-called gag orders of pharmacists. A gag order is an order, typically a legal order by a court or government, restricting information or comment from being made public or passed on to any unauthorized third party. Although Trump's vision is to increase competition, reduce regulations, and change the incentives for all players in the pharmaceutical industry, Congress needs to effectively use their power to do more than Trump's vision. Congress needs to listen to the Americans that are suffering instead of focusing on the substantial monetary amount that the pharmaceutical manufacturers spent on lobbying. This leads me to my conclusion. The burden should no longer fall on the shoulders of patients and their families. Nobody in today's society should have to beg for medicine, ration their treatment, or go to the black market for their life-saving medication. Thank you.
Okay, the proposition's clear. There's plenty of controversy on it. There's no preview, so that's a little bit of a drawback. But you do signpost on the points as you get to them, and I thought that that was pretty reasonable. On the first point, the information is very generic at the beginning. You do finally have an example of somebody who is affected by the prices, and I think that that's a pretty good example, but that's about as far as it goes. The one example that you have of the outrageous price fixing, I think is kind of exceptional, and it's out of context, and there are some other issues with that example that'll probably come up in the refutation. I'm not sure that that's the best way to make this particular argument. I think that example is potentially problematic. The better example, the better information that you had was the increased price of insulin from 1996 until 2019, and the notion that there aren't really substantial differences in the insulin that has been produced in that time period. That actually comes up later in your second argument. Your second argument, I think, is the one that develops this issue the most, explaining a little bit about how the patents are being misused by the companies, how that allows them to maintain a stranglehold on the marketplace. I think that that's a good argument, and there's some good information here that suggests that the alterations in the patents are so minor that does not justify letting them maintain their basic monopoly on those particular things. The price fixing argument is mostly a question instead of an argument, and I think you need to develop that a little bit more. And I think it would be easy to develop because the third argument doesn't really get you very much. First of all, there's not any evidence to support your point. Just as an argument that says Congress needs to do more than what the Trump policy did, but doesn't tell us why the Trump policy is going to be ineffective, and that's not going to have the impact that is suspected. And it's largely not relevant to the other issues that you're talking about here, unless it is designed to reduce prices in the long run. And if it's not going to reduce prices, you need to make a stronger argument about that. If you want to stick to the argument about price fixing and about patents, I think maybe the first two arguments should be the focus of your attention, because that's where you have most of your information. All right, I'm trying to keep it a little